The silence of the Zio's debris field was not the comforting, pressure-damped quiet of an active bridge. It was a tangible, malignant presence, a void that swallowed light and sound. Commander Jace Thurin, or what was left of him, felt it press against the hull of the stray dog, a constant, psychic weight. He sat strapped into the command chair, the synth leather worn smooth and cracked beneath his calloused palms, its surface a graveyard for his own sweat and blood. 10 years. 10 years since the Coalition's disastrous final push against the Viral Empire, the ancient, biotechnological race now redefined as vampires in the human collective consciousness, not for mythical reasons, but for their ability to thrive on conflict and their terrifying, living weapons that drank energy and essence. 10 years since the battle that earned Jace the scar over his left brow and the cold, unyielding hatred in his soul. The scar was fading, but the hatred was not. The stray dog was an insult to military engineering, a patchwork of salvaged armor plating, non-standard thrusters, and illegal sensor arrays. Jace called himself a scavenger, but the truth was he was a gravekeeper, patrolling the vast, orbiting cemetery of the war's final, brutal days. The sun, Zios, was an extinguished cinder, its light a bruised purple smudge. Around it, the frozen debris of humanity's finest dreadnoughts lay side by side with the colossal, petrified remains of Viral cruisers. The sight was a constant, searing reminder. Jace wore the uniform of survival, thick, patched thermals, a heavy ballistic vest, and his pulse pistol holstered low. On his belt, secured by a magnetic catch, was the symbol of his failure and his vengeance, a combat knife. Its blade wasn't steel, it was a shard of the shattered cockpit glass from the Vigilance, his last command. It was sharp, brittle, and utterly useless against the thick armor of the present, but it was his broken wing, a piece of the past that refused to let him fly away. The only break in the monotony of grief and greed was the console's soft chime. Proximity alert, 0.5 kilometers. Contact resolving. Jace's hand instantly went to the pistol grip. He zoomed in on the tactical display. The shape resolved. A Viral ship, scout class, sleek and cruel, shaped like a poisonous seed pod. Humans called them thorn ships. Another dead ghost, Jace muttered, leaning back, the chair protesting. Most Viral derelicts were cold, their bioorganic cores drained. But this one, the sensor log flickered. Energy core, low. Biological signature, present. Unstable. High blood anomaly detected. A biological signature. That was impossible. Viral ships were living beings, but their life essence shut down instantly upon damage to the core. This signature was not a ship's low hum. It was a single, frantic, high-pitched frequency, a scream trapped in a machine. It felt feverish, a chaotic pattern of nanobiotics that should have been pristine and harmonic. This was discord. Jace ran a deep scan, bypassing the usual safety protocols. The readings were unlike anything documented in the Coalition archives. It was a fusion, a grotesque merger of Viral high blood physiology and experimental biotech. It was forbidden science. The scavenger in Jace was replaced by the hunter. Forbidden science meant incredible value. It meant a secret that the current, fractured Viral remnants would pay anything to recover, or eliminate. "All right, you beautiful wreck," Jace whispered, his voice dry. "Let's see what kind of prize you are." He nudged the stray dog forward, the thruster spitting brief flares of plasma. As he approached, the thorn ship looked ancient and ravaged, its biowoven hull the color of old, bruised ivory. Yet, the pulsating signal intensified, no longer a scream, but a distinct, erratic heartbeat. The docking clamp engaged with a heavy, jarring thunk. The noise in the dead field was obscene. Jace cycled the airlock, the familiar hiss of depressurization a brief comfort before he stepped into the unknown. The environment of the Viral ship was an immediate, visceral assault on human senses. Human ships smelled of ozone, oil, and recycled air. The thorn ship smelled of damp earth, sweet decay, and the metallic tang of fresh blood. It was the smell of a wild predator's den. The architecture was unnerving. The walls weren't plated steel. They were lattices of hardened bone-like cartilage woven with thick, dormant veins that had once carried nutrient fluid. Faint phosphorescent moss grew in the crevices, casting the corridor in an unnatural, eerie blue-green twilight. Jace moved with the practiced stealth of a man who lived by surprise and violence. His flashlight beam was a sharp, white intrusion cutting through the gloom. He passed chambers where desiccated Viral flora had once synthesized the ship's atmosphere. He saw discarded flight suits that looked like shed insect skins. The pulsating biosignal grew stronger, leading him deeper into the ship's core, the synaptic throne room. The entrance to the bridge was partially open. The sinew fiber iris that required a genetic key to open was curled back and blackened, clearly torn by an internal energy search. Jace squeezed through the gap, his plasma cutter scraping against the organic doorframe. The bridge was a grotesque cathedral. In the center, fused to the synaptic throne, a massive chair made of glowing amber-like crystal, was the source of the signal. She was a woman, but instantly recognizable as virile high blood. Her skin was the color of pale moonlight, almost translucent, etched with intricate, faintly glowing patterns that signified her vampire royalty. Her long, unbound silver hair drifted in the low, unstable gravity, forming a halo around a face contorted in a silent scream. She was naked, and her slender, athletic form was a map of surgical horror. From her spine, her arms, and her legs, thick, black, root-like cables of biotech snaked out, burrowing deep into her flesh before connecting directly to the throne. She was a living component plugged into a dying machine. Worse, her wounds were actively weeping a fluid that glowed with a sickeningly sweet golden luminescence, the mark of high blood. The nanites within her veins pulsed erratically, visible beneath the skin, the forbidden tech that Jace recognized from the war dossiers. Princess Kira, the last surviving heir of the virile empire. The celestial bloom. The soldier in Jace Theron took over. He saw the face of the enemy that had broken him. He saw Sergeant Rasta, his friend, dying on the floor of the Vigilance. He drew his pulse pistol in a fluid motion, aiming center mass. The rage was cold, pure, and undeniable. His finger tightened on the trigger. Then her eyes opened. They were the color of liquid chrome, vast and unnerving, but swimming with a raw, undeniable pain and exhaustion. They locked onto his. Please, the word was a dry, melodic alto, a sound so unexpected it shattered the dam of his rage. It was small. Help me. Jace's mind was a maelstrom. Vengeance screamed for the shot. Survival whispered of the king's ransom she represented. He lowered the pistol a fraction. Who are you? Jace snarled, his voice thick with suppressed violence. Kira, she breathed. Vampire Princess Kira. They mix my blood. The key to stop them. To stop the next war. The key. Jace laughed, a harsh, rusty sound that echoed in the vast chamber. You are not a key. You are a weapon. Or a target. He holstered the pistol, the move almost involuntary. He knew what he had to do. The broken wings remained sheathed, the vengeance delayed. She was worth more alive. He unspooled a set of magnetic binders from his belt. Do not touch me, she hissed, the first spark of her infamous royal fire finally showing. You do not have a choice in the matter, Princess, Jace said flatly. He clamped the magnetic binders around her wrists, the metal biting into the cold skin. As he secured her, his hand brushed against the cable connection near her forearm. The ship responded. A deep, resonant hum started to build in the air. The dormant veins in the walls began to pulse with a faint golden light. What is happening? Jace demanded, stepping back. The ship, she gasped, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and triumph. It is responding to me, to the tech in my blood. It is waking up. A new sound cut through the rising thrum of the engine. A tight beam transmission from outside. A hunter was closing in fast. The ship lurched violently as its ancient bioorganic engines ignited with a guttural roar. Jace was trapped. In a living prison. With a terrifying vampire princess. And death was coming for them both. The jump was not the smooth, calculated transition Jace remembered from his coalition days. It was a wrenching, biological act of teleportation. The Thorn ship shrieked, its biohull contracting like a muscle in spasm. Jace felt the force of the jump like a sledgehammer blow, the G-forces threatening to collapse his lungs. His vision tunneled, a violent cascade of swirling color and non-Euclidean geometry. He saw Kira during the jump, rigid, her slender body arched in what seemed like an unholy mixture of agony and ecstasy. The golden light beneath her skin intensified, momentarily blinding. She was not piloting the ship. She was the ship, the virile architecture responding to the rogue nanobiotics in her veins. When the translation ended, Jace gasped for air, his ribs aching, his body feeling like a shattered mosaic. The starfield was gone, replaced by the grim, flickering neon of a dense cityscape. Kira, however, was already recovering. The vacant, pained look was replaced by a sharp, unnerving clarity. She worked at the synaptic throne, her movements fluid despite the bonds. The magnetic binders were strong, but clearly struggling against her high blood strength. That, she said, her voice now a melodic, confident alto, entirely devoid of the weakness she showed earlier, was invigorating. I apologize if it was too much for your fragile human physiology. Jace staggered to his feet, gripping the edge of a console to steady himself. Where are you taking us? Where are we? We are not going anywhere, Commander, she corrected, the title spat out with aristocratic disdain. The ship is following a dormant emergency protocol, taking me to the nearest safe harbor where I can find the components to stabilize my core. You are merely baggage, and a particularly cumbersome one at that. He watched her wounds. The deep lacerations he had seen weeping golden fluid in the debris field were sealing over, leaving behind faint, pearlescent scars. The virile reputation for near-instantaneous regeneration, fueled by their enhanced high blood, was not a myth. She was a monster, rapidly healing before his eyes. "You are a monster," Jace said, the words heavy with conviction. "I am a survivor," she countered, looking at his scarred face. "The designation is academic." Jace's hand flew to the hilt of his combat knife, the broken wings. "I have endured things you cannot even imagine, Princess," he hissed, the memory of the prison camps and the virile bioweaponry flooding his mind. "I have seen your people turn men inside out for sport." She did not flinch, meeting his gaze with her liquid chrome eyes. "And yet, here you are," she whispered, her voice carrying a chilling patience. "Holding a shard of glass against the throat of your only hope for survival. How very human of you." Jace hesitated. The moment of visceral vengeance passed, replaced by the cold, calculating mind of the scavenger. He slowly sheathed the broken knife. "Tell me why you're a target or I finish the job," the other virile started. The Thorn ship made a rough landing in a desolate, forgotten corner of a sprawling orbital platform. The city, Port Noctis, was a known haven for smugglers, mercenaries, and those hiding from the galactic eye. Jace grabbed a heavy hooded scavenger's cloak from his gear and threw it at her. "Cover yourself. The gold on your skin is a king's ransom here." Kira pulled the rough fabric around her naked form. The hood immediately cast her face in deep shadow, concealing the ethereal glow of her skin. For the first time she looked small, almost fragile, a fleeting illusion Jace instantly dismissed. Stepping out onto the platform was a sensory assault. The air was thick, heavy, tasting of burning spice, hot metal, and unwashed bodies. Port Noctis was a canyon city, a maze of narrow alleyways and multi-level platforms lit by the flickering holographic signs of weapon shops, gambling dens, and illegal gene splicing clinics. Beings of a dozen different species shoved past them, a toxic river of smugglers, mercenaries, and thieves. Jace kept one hand firmly on his pistol, the other gripping the magnetic energy filament connected to Kira's binders, pulling her along behind him. "Oh, charming place," she commented from beneath her hood, her voice laced with aristocratic, chilling disgust. "It smells like my cousin's reptile pits, right after a particularly messy feeding." "Hey, just keep your head down and let me handle this," Jace growled, his nerves fraying from the constant brush against the lawless crowd. His objective was a black market regulator, a specific component that could handle the erratic frequency of Kira's nanobiotics, temporarily stabilizing her core charge. He located a stall run by a four-armed Grolon, its shelves overflowing with stolen and scavenged tech. While Jace haggled fiercely, trying to trade a memory core from his last salvage run for the regulator, Kira stood silently behind him. He was so focused on the Grolon's attempts to price gouge him that he did not notice she had drifted closer to a display of unsecured components, her bound hands hidden by the voluminous folds of the cloak. Suddenly, a commotion erupted behind him. Two hulking figures, reptilian thugs with syndicate tattoos on their scaled necks, had cornered an old merchant in the alley. It was a classic shakedown. Jace's instinct was to ignore it, finish his business and leave. He had buried his moral code with his fleet. But then one of the thugs shoved the old merchant brutally to the ground, and something inside Jace snapped. It wasn't heroism, it was a deeply ingrained, uncontrollable reaction to casual cruelty. With a heavy sigh he turned. "Gentlemen, I think the old man has paid his dues." The lead thug grinned, showing a row of needle-sharp teeth. "Mind your own business, human, before we decide to take a toll from you too." Jace did not waste words. He moved. His first punch was a precise, brutal blow to the thug's throat. As the creature gagged, Jace spun, kicking the second thug's legs out from under him. He drew his pistol in a fluid motion, pressing the barrel against the first thug's head. "Leave," he said, his voice deadly calm. The two scrambled away, vanishing into the crowd. Jace holstered his weapon and turned back to the stall, only to see Kira holding the small crystalline regulator in her bound hands. The Grolon merchant was staring at the empty space on his shelf, his multiple mouths opening to shout. "I believe our transaction is complete," Kira said smoothly, tucking the component into a fold of her cloak. She had stolen it while Jace was distracted. "Run," Jace said, grabbing her arm and pulling her into the throng. They plunged deeper into the labyrinthine alleys, the Grolon's enraged shouts echoing behind them. They were almost to the docking bay when a new voice, amplified and chillingly familiar, cut through the dense noise of the den. "The bounty is mine. 5 million credits for the runaway princess." Jace looked up. Standing on a sky bridge above them was a massive figure in obsidian armor. A xylot, a species renowned for their relentless tracking abilities. It was the bounty hunter from the debris field. The hunter raised a heavy plasma rifle and fired a warning shot into the ground near their feet, sending sparks flying. Panic erupted in the market. 5 million credits. It was a king's ransom. Suddenly, Every smuggler, thief and mercenary in the alley was looking at them, their eyes filled with insatiable greed. Blaster bolts started to fly from all directions. This way. Jace yelled, shoving Kira down a narrow side passage. It was a chaotic, desperate flight. They dodged fire, overturned market stalls, and the grasping hands of those trying to claim the bounty. Jace fired his own pistol, providing cover fire as they sprinted for the stray dog. They were barely 100 meters from the docking bay when a stray shot ricocheted off a bulkhead and struck Kira in the shoulder. She cried out, stumbling. The impact tore the heavy scavenger's cloak from her, sending it fluttering to the grimy floor. In the dim, chaotic light of the canyon city, her skin, now exposed, began to glow with a soft, ethereal luminescence. The intricate patterns beneath its surface pulsed brightly, a beacon in the darkness. Her high blood, glowing gold, seeped from the wound. There was no longer any doubt. A collective gasp went through the crowd. It was her. The celestial bloom of the virile empire, alive and bleeding in their midst. The bounty hunter landed on the ground in front of them, blocking their path. Nowhere left to run, Your Highness. But Kira was already moving. With a surge of adrenaline, she spun, using the energy filament connecting their binders as a whip, catching the hunter's plasma rifle and tearing it from his grasp. It was the opening Jace needed. He lunged forward, slamming his shoulder into the zealot's chest, sending the massive being staggering backward. He dragged Kira the last few feet onto the stray dog's boarding ramp just as it began to retract. The ship's engines roared to life, unleashing a wave of energy that sent the crowd scattering. Jace sealed the outer door as the ship lifted off, blaster fire pinging harmlessly against its salvaged hull. A moment later they were clear, accelerating into the blackness of space. The adrenaline faded, replaced by the bone-jarring thrum of the engines and Kira's sharp, pained breathing. She had collapsed against the wall of the airlock, clutching her shoulder. The wound was deep, the golden blood flowing freely. Jace looked down at her. At the glowing skin, the fragile tremble in her limbs. The arrogant princess was gone, replaced by a wounded, cornered girl. His hatred for her people, was a fire in his gut. But layered over it now was a confusing, unwelcome sense of responsibility. She was his prisoner, his asset, his problem. With a heavy sigh, he knelt down. He opened a medical kit from his scavenger pack, his movements brisk and impersonal. Hold still, he ordered, his voice rougher than he intended. He had to be gentle. His fingers brushed against her strangely warm, faintly glowing skin as he applied the antiseptic. She hissed in pain, but she did not pull away. As he worked, dressing the wound with a regeneration patch, he saw the intricate shimmering patterns on her skin up close. They were beautiful, like a star chart written on flesh. He finished his work and stood up, avoiding her gaze. He had fought for her. He had saved her. He did not understand why. He turned to leave the airlock and head for the bridge, needing the cold logic of a ship's console to clear his head. As he reached the doorway, her voice, soft and tired, stopped him. Thank you, Jace. It was the first time she had used his name. He did not turn around. He did not reply. He simply stood there for a long moment in the silent corridor of the Thorn ship, more conflicted and uncertain than he had been in years. The stray dog, now tethered to the recovered Thorn ship and guided by its erratic instinctual programming, tore through the Veil Nebula. This colossal, swirling shroud of crimson and violet gas was known in the Outer Rim as a place where the ghosts of old war arcs slept. These were the Leviathans of the last war, colossal virile world killers, now adrift and silent. Their dead biohulls, some hundreds of kilometers long, floated like mountain ranges in the cosmic dust. Their interiors scoured by decades of radiation. It was the perfect, terrifying place to hide. No sane pilot, hunter or otherwise, would risk navigating the nebula's treacherous gravitational tides and phantom energy signatures. But the Thorn ship, guided by Kira's fragmented data and its own organic systems, moved through the wreckage with an eerie, predatory grace. Jace stood on the bridge of the stray dog, using the console to track the Thorn ship's chaotic path. The silence between him and Kira had stretched for hours, a taut wire of unspoken hostility and reluctant alliance. Kira was in the cockpit of her own ship, the stolen regulator component in her hand. The rough fabric of the scavenger's cloak lay discarded, and she was only wearing the magnetic binders. Jace watched her through the viewport. She was sitting on the deck, her back against the base of the synaptic throne, meticulously working the stolen crystalline regulator into a port on her forearm, adjacent to the most active cluster of her nanobiotics. There was a soft, wet click. The faint, erratic pulsing of the golden light beneath her skin smoothed instantly into a steady, rhythmic glow. She let out a long, shuddering breath of relief, the first truly vulnerable sound Jace had heard from her since the ambush. The instability is contained, she announced, her voice still melodic, but tinged with deep weariness. For now. But the core charge is still depleting. Glad to hear it, Jace said without turning around, his voice dry. I was getting tired of being your personal medic and getaway driver. You do both so poorly, I'm surprised you haven't been replaced, she retorted, though the barb lacked its usual sharp edge. She sounded profoundly exhausted. The ship, this body, they are both running on borrowed time. We need to reach the core synapse. Jace finally turned to face her, leaning against the cold metal bulkhead. You've mentioned that before. The Great Viral Control Center. What is it exactly? Kira hesitated, her chrome eyes studying his face, weighing the risk of trust. The gesture itself was a new development. It is not a place, she said slowly, rising to her feet with newfound steadiness. It is a nexus. The central hub from which the old empire controlled its fleets, its armies, its entire biotechnological infrastructure. She walked toward the crystalline viewport, her bare feet making no sound on the deck. It is the mind of the virile war machine. Kira turned back to him, gesturing to the shimmering, intricate patterns beneath her pale skin, the celestial bloom that marked her as vampire royalty. The nanobiotics my father embedded in me are more than a failsafe, Jace. They are a map. A living key encrypted directly into my nervous system. Jace stared at the visible, luminous gold threads pulsing beneath the surface of her arm where the regulator was installed. This is not decoration, she continued, the revelation cold and sharp. It is a star chart. A set of coordinates. A genetic password. It leads to the synapse. A cold knot formed in Jace's stomach. The implications were staggering, rewriting everything he thought he knew about his prisoner. So, whoever controls you, controls the map, he stated flatly. Whoever controls the map, she corrected, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, can access the synapse. And whoever accesses the synapse can rewrite the very code of war in this galaxy. The statement hung in the air, heavy with consequence. They could reactivate the entire dormant virile fleet, turn our living ships against their new masters, she explained. Or they could issue a single command to deactivate every piece of virile technology, from a soldier's rifle to the mightiest war arc. She paused, letting the full weight of the statement settle. They could end any future war before it even begins. Jace stared at her. She was not just a fugitive princess, she was the most powerful weapon in the known universe, and she had just admitted to him, her captor and enemy, the entire secret. The new houses, my sister Lyra, they do not want to destroy the key, Kira said, her gaze lost in the swirling nebula outside. They want to dissect it. They want to tear this map from my body and use it to build an empire that will make my father's look like a peaceful garden. Before Jace could respond, a jarring alarm blared through the ship. Red lights flashed, bathing the bridge in a bloody glow. An energy reading spiked on the main console. It wasn't a ship. It was a planet. One they were approaching far too quickly. What now? Jace demanded, rushing to the console. Kira's fingers flew across the luminous surface. It's a planetary defense system. Old Imperial. It's supposed to recognize my genetic signature, but something is corrupting the signal. She grimaced as another violent jolt shook the vessel. The planet's atmosphere. It's saturated with wild biotech, remnants of a failed terraforming project from the war. It's reacting with the nanobiotics in my blood, confusing the ship's systems. Their descent was no longer controlled. They were being pulled in, caught in a gravitational net woven from rogue, aggressive technology. The ship screamed as it hit the upper atmosphere, its biohull glowing white-hot. Jace strapped himself into the pilot's auxiliary chair as the vessel bucked and shuddered, a wild beast fighting its leash. He watched on the view screen as a jungle of impossible colors rushed up to meet them. The crash was a symphony of destruction. The ship tore a scar through the alien forest, shearing trees of pulsating fungus and crystalline flora before finally plowing into the soft, swampy earth of a ravine and coming to a violent, sickening halt. The lights died. The engines fell silent. The only sound was the hiss of ruptured conduits and the steady drip of some viscous fluid from the ceiling. Jace, bruised and aching, unstrapped himself. Kira was slumped over the console, unconscious. He checked her pulse, rapid but steady. Grabbing a survival pack and his rifle, he threw Kira over his shoulder in a fireman's carry. The Thorn ship was dead, its biohull breached. They were exposed. He kicked open the main hatch and stepped out into a world of vibrant, menacing life. The air was thick, humid, and smelled strongly of ozone and decay, mixed with a sickly sweet floral scent. He found a shallow cave carved into the side of the ravine, its entrance masked by a curtain of hanging phosphorescent vines. He laid Kira down gently. Her skin was hot to the touch, and the patterns on her body were glowing erratically, shifting and changing shape like oil on water. As dusk fell, the sky turned a sickly shade of green, and a strange shimmering rain began to fall. It was not water. It was a fine glittering mist that seemed to hum with a low energy. Jace watched as the mist seeped into the cave, and a feeling of profound disorientation began to wash over him. The edges of his vision softened. The chittering sounds of the jungle deepened into what sounded like whispers. "It is a hallucinogen," Jace said, his own voice sounding distant. "Some kind of airborne spore or pollen. We are breathing it in." He stumbled back, shaking his head. He looked at Kira. Her eyes were unfocused, staring at something he could not see. She was muttering in the flowing, sibilant virile tongue. "The sky is weeping light," she whispered in accented standard, a strange, dreamy smile on her face. "They are memories. Can you see them, Commander? The memories of the dead." Jace's mind twisted. The shadows danced, taking on familiar shapes. He saw the faces of his fallen unit, their eyes accusing him. "You left us, Commander. You survived." He looked at Kira, and for a terrifying second he didn't see her. He saw the virile warrior who had killed Sergeant Rasta. His hand went for his knife, the broken wings. He snarled, his mind twisting reality into a nightmare. "You killed them all." Kira scrambled backward. In her warped perception, Jace was not a human scavenger. He was one of her sister's elite guards, his knife a surgical tool meant to carve the map from her flesh. "You will not take it from me," she shrieked. They lunged at each other in the confined space, two prisoners of their own trauma. The blade of his knife sliced her arm. The edge of a rock she swung glanced off his temple. He tackled her and they fell to the ground, wrestling for control. His hand was on her throat. Hers was clawing at his face. They were a breath away from mutual destruction. Then something broke. Jace looked down into her terrified chrome eyes and saw not a monster, but a reflection of his own desperation, a survivor. A choked, hysterical sound escaped his lips. It turned into a raw, ragged, utterly unhinged laugh. Kira, seeing the sudden shift in his eyes, stopped struggling. Confusion warred with fear. Then she too began to laugh, a weak chuckle that grew into a full-throated peal of madness. A duet of shared trauma against the backdrop of the whispering storm. They collapsed against each other, the fight completely drained. The hallucinogenic fog receded, leaving behind a raw, painful clarity. "I almost killed you," Jace said, his voice hollow. "I almost caved in your skull," she replied, touching the shallow cut on her arm, watching a bead of golden blood well up. "We are a terrible pair, you and I." The hallucinogenic storm eventually passed, leaving the jungle dripping and quiet. They spent the next few hours sitting by a pathetic, smoky campfire Jace managed to start, drying their clothes and nursing their aches. The tension between them was no longer hatred but something far more volatile, a raw, shared intimacy born of madness. Kira had retreated into a thoughtful silence, her chrome eyes reflecting the struggling flame. The magnetic binders were still on her wrists, but Jace hadn't felt the need to check them. She did not look at him. She enjoyed finding new ways to break people. "I imagined she would find this planet inspiring," Jace thought bitterly. In that moment, however, they were not a human and a virile vampire. They were not a commander and a princess. They were just two soldiers scarred by the same war, confessing their wounds by a dying campfire. Kira slowly reached up and unclasped the scavenger cloak Jace had given her. She let it fall from her shoulders. The regeneration patch he had applied on the ship had already fallen off, leaving behind another faint pearlescent scar. But it was not her shoulder she wanted to show him. She turned slightly, showing him her side. Just below her ribs, a long jagged scar, thicker and uglier than the others, ran from her back to her navel. The skin was puckered and discolored. It was not a battle wound, it was clearly surgical. "This is where they put it in," she said, her voice barely a whisper, the memory painful. "They cut me open. They wove the primary conduits of the map directly into my neural pathways, directly into my spine. When they were done, they reknitted the flesh to hide the seams." Jace reached out, his fingers tracing the edge of the scar. His touch was surprisingly gentle, professional, yet hesitant. Her skin was strangely warm, almost electric. A current passed between them, a spark of something that had been simmering beneath the surface since they first met. It was not hatred. It was not anger. It was something far more dangerous, recognition. He looked up from the scar to her face. Her chrome eyes were dark, her lips slightly parted. The space between them became charged, heavy with unspoken questions and shared trauma. He leaned in and she met him halfway. Their faces were inches apart. He could feel her breath, faintly smelling of the sweet, strange decay of the jungle. He could see the universe reflected in her alien eyes. He was going to kiss her. He was going to close that final infinite decimal gap and press his lips against hers. But she pulled back at the last second, shaking her head. A look of profound sadness crossed her features, quickly shuttered behind the facade of the vampire princess. "You would not survive me, Jace," she whispered, the words holding a terrible, protective truth. "The nanobiotics, they are a part of me now. My kiss, it could be a poison to your kind. A neurotoxin that stops the human heart. Before the charged silence could stretch any further, a new sound cut through the jungle. The sharp crack of a pulse rifle. It was close. Shouts in a guttural, corrupted dialect followed. Jace was on his feet in an instant, grabbing his own rifle. Raiders. Scavengers looking for the crash site. They are after the tech, Kira said, standing behind him, her tactical mind clicking back into place. If they find us, they will tear us apart for the components in our bodies. Then we do not let them find us, Jace said, checking his rifle. They fought the raiders with brutal, efficient teamwork, a seamless dance of violence. When it was over, they returned to the cave, adrenaline slowly draining away. Kira, exhausted, finally sank to the floor and slept, truly resting for the first time in his presence. She was his enemy. She was his prisoner. She was his partner. He did not know what she was to him anymore. But he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that he would let no one else have her. The first thing Jace noticed upon waking was the profound, expectant stillness of the jungle. The second was the cold. The space beside him was empty. His rifle was where he had left it, but she was gone. The heavy scavenger's cloak lay folded neatly on the cave floor. Panic, cold and sharp, lanced through him. Then he saw it on the flat gray surface of the rock where her head had rested. A message was scrolled, written in a dark, glistening fluid that was already starting to dry, her golden blood. The letters were elegant, precise virile script. Follow only if you trust me. Trust her. The concept was absurd. She was a vampire high blood, a princess of the empire that had dismantled his life. But she was also the woman who had laughed with him in a hallucinogenic storm, who had shown him her deepest scar, who had pulled away from a kiss because she was afraid of poisoning him. This was not an abduction. This was a choice she had made, and a choice she was now forcing upon him, to follow the most dangerous woman he had ever met into the heart of the fire. There was no real choice at all. Jace spent 2 hours preparing. He salvaged what he could from the wrecked ship and the dead raiders' corrupted virile biotech. He took plates of hardened cartilage and a neural scrambler. He used his plasma cutter to reshape the plates, integrating them with his own tactical gear. He smeared a paste of phosphorescent fungi over the armor, mimicking the faint glow of virile circulatory systems. It was a crude disguise, a hybrid mercenary plausible enough for the lawless outer territories. Using the ship's damaged navigation logs, he found her destination, a hidden virile outpost designated Sanctuary K7. The journey was tense and silent. The outpost resolved on his screen, not built on an asteroid but into one, a massive hollowed-out rock, its surface bristling with weapon emplacements. The entrance was a colossal biomechanical iris that dilated to accept incoming ships. A fortress. He broadcast a standard mercenary identification code. The neural scrambler pulsed, masking his purely human DNA with a chaotic wash of static and virile markers. The iris ground open and a green docking light beckoned him in. The outpost was a sterile, intimidating display of virile power. The architecture was all soaring arches of bone-white material, and the walls seemed to breathe with a slow, rhythmic light. Guards in sleek black armor, their faces hidden behind insectoid helmets, stood at perfect attention. His disguise held for less than 15 minutes. He was making his way through a crowded transit hub when a scanner archway flashed a sudden, piercing crimson. Human detected. Contaminant breach, a synthesized voice announced. He was disarmed and subdued with brutal efficiency. He was dragged through stark white corridors to a vast circular chamber that could only be a throne room. In the center, on a raised dais, sat a throne of jagged obsidian-like material. On the throne sat Lyra, Kira's sister. And standing beside the throne, head bowed in submission, was Kira. She was dressed in a simple gray tunic, the attire of a servant or a penitent. The fire he had seen in her was gone, replaced by a vacant, broken compliance. So this is the human pet you picked up in your little flight of fancy, Kira, Lyra said, circling Jace like a shark. He is unremarkable, messy, asymmetrical. Why did you allow him to live? He was a tool, Sister Lyra, Kira said, her voice a monotone. She did not look at Jace. A tool you brought to my doorstep. You have led my enemies to me. I came here to surrender, Lyra said softly. To accept my fate. He followed. His presence is not my design. A cold dread washed over Jace. This was not an act. He had been a fool. He had trusted her and she had led him into a trap. What should we do with him, little sister? Lyra purred. Shall we have him flayed? Or perhaps we could test the new neural parasites on him? Kira finally lifted her head, and her chrome eyes met Jace's. For a fraction of a second, he saw it. A flicker of the woman from the jungle, a spark of defiance quickly extinguished. He is a soldier, Kira said, her voice flat. Torture would be a waste. A quick death is more efficient. It will prove my loyalty to you and to the new order. Betrayal was a blade, and it twisted in Jace's gut, sharper and more painful than any physical wound. Jace was dragged through the corridors to the echo chamber, a dark spherical room where light and sound seemed to be absorbed by the black porous stone walls. The moment the heavy door sealed behind them, a profound, disorienting silence fell. Jace was shoved into the center of the room. Kira entered behind him, the guards flanking her. "Leave us," Kira commanded the guards. Her voice was no longer submissive. It was the voice of a princess imbued with an authority that was absolute. The guards bowed stiffly and exited. They were alone. "Are you treacherous?" Jace started, his voice a low, venomous snarl. "Quiet," she snapped, her entire demeanor changing in an instant. The broken servant vanished, replaced by the sharp, focused strategist. She rushed to his side, her fingers working quickly at the complex locking mechanism on his binders. "There is no time. My plan is to get to the core synapse, which is hidden in the heart of this station behind security protocols that even my sister cannot bypass." The binders fell away. Jace rubbed his wrists, staring at her in stunned confusion. "Your plan?" "Your plan was to serve me up for execution. The final access point requires 2 distinct genetic markers to open. One of a virile high blood and one of a non-virile," she explained in a rapid whisper. "It is a fail-safe from the old war to prevent any single person from seizing control. Lyra has been trying for months to splice a viable hybrid to get past it. She has not succeeded." She looked him directly in the eyes, and the intensity of her gaze stole his breath. "I did not lead you into a trap, Jace. I brought you here because I need you. You are my key." The anger, the betrayal, it all dissolved, replaced by the familiar, dangerous current that flowed between them. "So what now?" he asked. "We just walk out of here?" "No," she said, her voice softening, a deep, terrible regret flashing in her chrome eyes. "Now I have to kill you." She rose up on her toes, her hands coming up to cup his face. The air crackled, and the moment that had been interrupted in the cave returned, more potent, more desperate. She pressed her lips to his, and the words of the title hung heavy in the suffocating silence. "End me or enter me?" It was not a gentle kiss. It was fierce, possessive, a branding. Her lips were soft, but there was a strange metallic taste to them, and then the faint tingling numbness. The poison hit. "It is a neurotoxin from the crate orchid," she whispered against his lips, her voice the last clear sound he heard. "It mimics death. Slows the heart to a single beat per minute. Complete paralysis. It is my only way of getting you out of here." As his knees buckled, she caught him, lowering his body gently to the floor. Her chrome eyes shimmered with what looked like tears. "Just hold on. Survive this, Jace. Please survive this." The world dissolved into blackness. His last conscious thought was the raw, ironic realization. The kiss he had wanted was the one that was killing him. The neurotoxin, delivered through Kira's poisonous kiss, turned Jace into a captive within his own skin. The world dissolved not into blackness, but into a suffocating gray. His consciousness remained agonizingly lucid, trapped in a body where the heart beat only once every minute, a dull, seismic thump against his ribs. He was a weight now, a piece of refuse. He felt the cold, hard surface of a transport gurney beneath him, the mechanical shing of its wheels echoing in the silence of the sterile corridor. He was nothing but a corpse being processed by the unforgiving logistics of Sanctuary K7. His human mind, stripped of sensory input and the ability to move, turned inward. It was a hell of forced introspection. He relived the fires of Cygnus X1, the screams of his crew, the bioagent that melted the faces of his friends. Kira's kiss, the ultimate act of intimacy and betrayal, kept repeating in his memory, a desperate question. "End me or enter me?" He wanted it to be end me. He wanted the final, justifying anger of betrayal. That would have been simpler. He could have died with his hatred intact. But the soldier in him, the one who survived torture, refused to surrender. He focused on the only thing he could control, the 1 beat per minute of his damaged heart, his body's desperate refusal to truly die. The gurney stopped with a metallic jolt. The air changed. It was no longer sterile, it was thick with the faint, unsettling smell of ozone and burning biomass. He could sense, more than hear, the deep, guttural thrum of immense power, the reclamation furnace, where all organic waste, failed experiments, and bodies too contaminated for study were incinerated and their components recycled into the station's living structure. He was roughly dumped onto a cold, grating floor. He felt the vibration of massive, automated machinery nearby. He was close to the furnace's intake. Then voices. They were clear, close, and chillingly distinct. "The neural severance is a delicate process," the officer, a nasal, technical voice, replied. "We will essentially be peeling the map's data layer from her cerebral cortex and spinal column. The integrity of the code should remain intact." A second voice, melodic, cold, and instantly recognizable as Lyra's, heard in response. "And the host?" Will she survive the severance? The silence from the officer was long, heavy, and absolute. The host, however, will not survive. The feedback loop will be catastrophic. The sudden, irreversible severing of the nanobiotics from the brainstem will instantly trigger massive neural shutdown and systemic shock. We have already programmed for a full system collapse. The officer's words hit Jace harder than any pulse blast. He lay there, rigid, unable to twitch a single muscle, as the awful truth of the virile plot sank in. Kira didn't know. Her entire insane plan, her sacrifice, her bravery, her desperate enter-me plea to save the galaxy, was all based on a lie. She was walking willingly into her own execution, believing it was a coup. Lyra never intended for the vampire princess to survive the process. Lyra had played them both. A pity, Lyra mused, her voice detached. She was almost useful again. Very well. Proceed. I want that code by the time the next cycle begins. I am tired of waiting to claim my empire. The voices faded as they moved down the corridor, their footsteps echoing away. Jace leaned against the cold metal grating, the furnace's heat a tangible presence nearby. His breath came in ragged, furious gasps, fighting the paralyzing toxin that still gripped his body. He had survived Kira's kiss, his fake death, and his journey to the brink of fire. He had been ready to follow her insane plan, to be her key, but the plan had changed. The last vestiges of the old soldier, the man who hated all virals, died in that moment. That burning, decades-long rage was not quenched. It was transformed, incinerated in the fires of the reclamation area, replaced by something cold, clear, and focused. He was no longer infiltrating. He was no longer playing a part. This was now a suicide mission, and he was going to save Kira or die tearing this station apart. There was no plan. There was only the fire in his blood and the image of her, broken on a surgical table, burned into his mind. He was not Lyra's target. He was not Kira's tool. He was her only hope. Jace focused his entire will on forcing the toxin out of his system. He recalled the brutal training exercises of his youth, the pain-tolerant simulations designed to break the human spirit. He forced adrenaline. A muscle in his forearm twitched. The movement, infinitesimally small, felt like a volcanic eruption. Then another. He fought the paralysis muscle by muscle, nerve by nerve, until finally, with a groan that tore through his throat, he managed to curl his fingers. His training knife, the broken wings, a shard of his past, a symbol of vengeance, had been taken. But the guards were careless. They had taken the knife, not the man. He searched the grime-covered grating with his fingers. Just feet away, lying where he had been dumped, was the magnetic sheath of the knife. And stuck to the sheath, a small, jagged fragment of the crystalline blade that had shattered when the guards disarmed him. It was a useless, pathetic piece of glass, barely 2 inches long. Jace retrieved the fragment, his hand trembling. It was not much, but it would have to be enough. He pushed himself to his feet, a symphony of pain. His ribs ached, his head throbbed, and the paralysis was slowly receding, leaving behind a profound exhaustion. He was a ghost in the machine now, an apex predator loosed in a cage. He moved through the bowels of the station, the maintenance tunnels, a maze of steaming pipes and crackling power conduits. He understood this territory far better than the pristine, sterile corridors above. He was no longer a human commander. He was a weapon fueled by rage and a desperate, terrifying sense of purpose. 2 guard patrols, dressed in standard black armor, rounded a corner. Before their helmeted sensors could even register him as a threat, he was on them. He used the darkness, the hiss of a pressure valve, the element of absolute surprise. The first guard went down with a choked gurgle. Jace's hand, now functioning on pure, brutal muscle memory, clamped over his respirator. The jagged point of his glass fragment, the broken wing, found the soft tissue at the base of the neck. The second guard turned, raising its pulse rifle, but Jace was already inside its guard. A whirlwind of motion. He broke the guard's arm at the elbow, spun him around, and used his body as a shield as he drove the improvised knife home. 2 silent, efficient deaths. He didn't feel remorse. He didn't feel anything but the cold, clear purpose that now consumed him. He stripped the first guard of his armor, took his rifle, and most importantly, secured the guard's key card. He climbed a service ladder, emerging through a floor grate into a deserted observation gallery overlooking the station's massive central power core. He could feel the thrum of immense, terrifying energy through the soles of his boots. He knew from schematic memory that the core synapse would be adjacent to this power source, shielded and isolated. He was coming, princess. He was coming to tear down her empire to save her. Jace moved along the perimeter of the observation gallery, the guard's pulse rifle heavy in his hands, its stolen armor bulky but providing crucial shielding. The glow of the central power core, a colossal crystalline sphere humming with contained energy, was a beacon. He found the heavily armored door he was looking for, flanked by two figures who were far larger and more imposing than the standard patrol. Their armor was different, obsidian black, augmented with external servos and glowing with ominous red power nodes. These were Lyra's personal enhanced guard, high-ranking virile soldiers, their physiology supercharged with advanced combat-ready nanobiotics. Jace knew he could not take them both head-on. Their armor would shrug off the standard pulse rifle fire he carried, and the jagged crystal fragment, the broken wings, was useless against reinforced plating. He located a high-pressure coolant pipe running along the ceiling, easily visible due to a faint layer of ice forming on its surface. It was a risk. A loud explosion would alert the entire sector. But he had no other option. He activated the heavy-duty plasma cutter salvaged from the furnace area. The beam hissed as it bit into the supercooled alloy of the pipe. The result was immediate and catastrophic. The pipe exploded with a concussive force, spewing a thick, churning cloud of cryogenic mist that instantly flash-froze everything it touched. The sudden, extreme cold caused immediate system shock. The guards, caught completely by surprise, were momentarily blinded. Their armor frosted over, sensors screaming with temperature and proximity warnings. It was the only opening Jace would get. He dropped the pulse rifle, deeming it too slow, and burst from the mist, a demon of vengeance. He slammed into the first guard with the momentum of a runaway freighter. His objective was the vulnerable joint between the helmet and the chest plate. He drove the shattered crystal of the broken wing, the hilt of his beloved knife, forward. The jagged fragment, fueled by his desperate fury, sank deep, finding the soft seals of the joint. The guard let out a choked, static-laced cry as its internal systems ruptured. It slumped, dead before it hit the floor, its enhanced strength useless against a precise, savage attack. But the second guard was already recovering, its massive frame turning toward him, servos whining loudly as it struggled against the cold. It swiped a gauntlet hand, a blow that would have pulped a normal man. Jace ducked under it, but the back swing caught him high on the ribs, cracking bone and sending a spray of fire through his nervous system. He gasped, the air punched from his lungs. The guard raised a fist to finish him. Jace, fueled by the terrifying, pure need to reach Kira, lunged forward. He abandoned the shattered hilt and drove his arm upward, jamming the shard of crystal, now twisted into a makeshift shiv, up under the guard's armored jaw. The enhanced soldier was impossibly strong. It grabbed his wrist, the servos in its gauntlet whining as it tried to crush his bones. There was a terrible high-pitched screech of stressed crystal, and the blade of his knife, the shard of his past, the symbol of his survival, shattered completely against the guard's reinforced spine. The guard finally slumped, dead, but Jace was left holding a useless, empty hilt. The broken wings was truly destroyed, leaving him weaponless, injured, and utterly exposed. Section 6.3, The Nightmare on the Table. He clutched his side, his breath coming in ragged, painful gasps. He used the last of his strength to force the heavy door open and stumbled inside. The scene before him was a nightmare of cold, clinical horror. The synapse chamber was vast, circular, and bathed in the harsh blue-white light of surgical lamps. In the center, Kira was stretched out on a metallic table, held in place by shimmering, invisible energy restraints at her wrists and ankles. She was conscious. Her chrome eyes were wide with a silent, pleading terror. Lyra stood nearby, watching with an expression of detached curiosity, like a scientist observing a lesser life form. A medical officer, his face a smooth, white mask, made adjustments to a complex array of laser emitters poised over Kira's body. Precise, bloodless incisions had been made along her side and back. The flaps of her skin, her beautiful, glowing vampire skin, were held open by small, localized stasis fields, exposing the intricate, luminous web of the neural map woven into her very being. The delicate golden fibers of the map pulsed faintly beneath the lights, like a captured constellation. It was beautiful, sickening, and alien. The neural interface is established, my lady, the medical officer said, not looking up from his work. We can begin the severance protocol. You proceed, Lyra commanded, her voice ringing with finality. That was the moment Jace chose to announce his presence. He did not shout. He did not issue a challenge. He simply threw the heavy, broken hilt of his knife, the useless piece of junk that had once been his vengeance, with all his remaining strength. It spun through the air and struck the medical officer square in the temple. The man dropped like a stone, the laser array sparking and shutting down instantly. Lyra spun around, her face a mask of disbelief and incandescent rage. Impossible. Jace charged, ignoring the fire in his ribs and the agony in his shoulder. He was not aiming for Lyra. He was aiming for the main control pedestal for the surgical equipment. He slammed his body into it, and the entire apparatus screeched as it was torn from its moorings. The stasis fields flickered and died. The energy restraints holding Kira vanished. 2 more enhanced guards stationed in alcoves near the wall moved to intercept him. He was weaponless, severely injured, and fading fast. He fought with the savagery of a cornered animal. He dodged a plasma blast that sizzled the air where his head had been. He grabbed a discarded surgical tool, a heavy metallic instrument, and swung it, shattering a guard's helmet visor. He fought. He bled. He refused to fall. A plasma bolt grazed his shoulder, searing the flesh. He stumbled, falling to one knee. One of the guards stood over him, rifle raised for the final, finishing shot. He heard a cry, a sound of pure, unadulterated rage, no longer a plea but a war howl. Kira, free from her restraints and fueled by the sight of Jace bleeding for her, had launched herself from the table. She landed on the guard's back, her fingers hooking into the gaps in his armor, her body a blur of motion. She was a princess no more. She was a feral creature fighting for her life, for his life. There was a wet tearing sound and the guard collapsed, a vital power conduit ripped from its neck. The second guard turned to face her, but Jace was back on his feet. He tackled the remaining guard, driving him backward into a power terminal. There was a massive explosion of sparks and the guard went rigid, its armor smoking before crashing to the floor. The chamber was suddenly quiet, save for the blare of station-wide alarms and their own harsh, ragged breathing. Lyra was gone, having vanished through a hidden exit during the chaos, her initial shock replaced by cunning. Jace staggered toward the table where Kira had been restrained. His vision was blurring at the edges. He saw the broken hilt of his knife lying on the floor. He picked it up, the jagged fragment of crystal, a pathetic remnant of the weapon that had defined him for so long. Kira had slumped against the table, clutching her side where the incisions had been made. Bioluminescent high blood leaked between her fingers. She was half-conscious, her body trembling with shock and overload. She looked at him, then at the broken blade in his hand. Her own hand, shaking, reached out toward it. He stood over her, his body a symphony of pain. He was torn. The rage that had driven him was gone, replaced by an aching, desperate need to protect her. But the symbol of his vengeance was still in his hand. He could end it all. He could grant her a merciful death, freeing her from her sister, from her purpose as a living weapon. It would be a final, terrible justice for his fallen friends. Her lips trembled. Her chrome eyes fixed on his. A single desperate whisper cut through the noise of the alarms, an echo of the choice she had forced upon him, now returning to him for the final verdict. End me or enter me. Jace's choice was made in a heartbeat. The past, the hatred, the vengeance, it was all meaningless ash. He let the broken hilt fall from his fingers. It clattered to the floor, the sound of a decade of grief being laid to rest. He knelt before her, his hands coming up to cradle her face. With a sound that was half a sob, half a roar of defiance against the entire galaxy, he kissed her. The world exploded. It was not a kiss of passion, but of detonation. The moment their lips met, the circuit was completed. Her mind crashed into his, not as a poison but as a flood. He felt her entire life, the cold loneliness of Viral Court, the terror of her father's experiments, the desperate flight through the stars, the sharp, biting fear of her sister's betrayal. And she felt his, the camaraderie of his unit, the searing fire of their deaths, the knowing emptiness of his survival, the confusing, powerful emotions she had awakened in him. Their minds, their memories, their very souls merged into a single incandescent point of consciousness. The map inside her was no longer just a code. It was a part of them both. And together, in that shared mental space they reached out. The core synapse, a colossal crystalline sphere suspended in the chamber below them, responded. It flared with a light so bright it was blinding. A pure white light that was not energy but information. A single command, born from their shared pain and reluctant hope, pulsed outward. A command not of control but of release. Sleep. The light emanating from the synapse was not merely bright, it was absolute. It was the color of pure, unblemished information, washing over the chamber, erasing shadows and doubt. Jace and Kira, connected by the raw, unbound neural link forged by their kiss, felt the command sleep rush out, an unstoppable tidal wave of deactivation protocol. But the act was too great, the psychic reverberation catastrophic. A wave of intense, high-frequency energy, the final death throes of the centralized viral war machine, washed back through their connection. Kira screamed, her body convulsing in Jace's arms. The overload was too much for her biologically enhanced human nervous system. Her chrome eyes rolled back in her head and she collapsed, a dead weight. The vibrant, living light of the neural map beneath her skin flickered and died, extinguished like a candle in a gale. Her skin was now the pale, still color of moonlight on snow, the intricate golden patterns vanished. The chamber around them began its violent, agonizing self-destruction. The synapse, its millennia-long purpose fulfilled, was now unstable. The walls cracked, fissure lines appearing with sickening speed. The ceiling groaned, raining down chunks of bone-white material. Consoles exploded in showers of blinding sparks, their bioorganic systems rejecting the death command. Jace, acting on pure, desperate instinct, lifted Kira into his arms. She was terrifyingly light, featherweight due to her slender, vampiric physiology, but the pain in his own body, the cracked ribs, the seared shoulder, screamed in protest. He ran, carrying her out of the dying chamber and into the chaos of the corridors. The entire station, Sanctuary K7, was tearing itself apart, physically and politically. The deactivation of all centralized viral tech had been a universal command. Loyalist defeat. Lyra's newly augmented enhanced guards went rigid and fell, their complex armor and nanobiotics instantly failing. Civil war eruption. The deactivation had, however, not affected the rebels who used scavenged, non-networked coalition tech. The sudden power vacuum was instantly filled with bloodshed and confusion. Pockets of brutal fighting raged in the corridors. Jace dodged blaster fire and leapt over the bodies of loyalists and rebels alike. His only thought was to get her to safety. Jace knew the station's layout from his infiltration data. He saw their only way out, a long enclosed skybridge of translucent bioglass that connected the main core station to the distant docking bay where the stray dog was birthed. As he sprinted onto the bridge, the structure shuddered violently. A stray missile, launched during a skirmish far below, struck one of its support pylons. The entire structure groaned, and cracks like lightning spiderwebbed across the glass floor beneath his feet. He ran faster, Kira held tight against his chest. The bridge began to disintegrate behind him. Large sections of the floor shattered, falling away into the dizzying void of the asteroid's hollow core. He could see the docking bay doors a mere 100 meters away. The bridge bucked violently, throwing him off balance. He looked back and saw a chasm of empty space chasing him, consuming the bridge piece by piece. With a final desperate surge of adrenaline, fueled by the burning image of her collapsed body, he pushed off, leaping the last 10 meters just as the final section of the skybridge gave way and plunged into the darkness. He landed hard on the solid deck of the docking bay, the impact jarring his already broken body. He rolled, shielding Kira with his own form, the pain almost blacking him out. He lay there, gasping for breath amidst the sounds of a dying station and a nascent rebellion, with the unconscious architect of it all limp in his arms. They were alive. They were free. And they had just broken the galaxy. Jace forced himself up. He dragged Kira's unconscious body to the stray dog. He used the stolen key card to override the security protocols and force the boarding ramp closed. A minute later, the stray dog, the coffin built for two, screamed through the void. It was a tiny, insignificant spark fleeing the death of a star-sized hornet's nest. Jace held the controls with a white-knuckled grip, his body a map of fresh agony. His ribs were a cage of fire, his shoulder a searing brand. Beside him, in the co-pilot seat, Kira was a fallen star. The vibrant, living light of the neural map had been extinguished. Her skin was the pale, smooth color of moonlight on snow. The only signs of her ordeal were the raw, angry red of the surgical incisions on her side and the faint golden residue of her high blood dried on her skin. She stirred as he leveled them out in the relative safety of deep space. Sanctuary K7 was shrinking behind them, a rapidly cooling red dot in the black. Her chrome eyes fluttered open. They no longer swirled with the data of a galactic network. They were simply reflecting the dim light of the cockpit. They were just eyes now. She looked lost. Did we? She began, her voice a dry, fragile whisper. We did, Jace confirmed, his voice rough. The synapse is gone and so is the station. She slowly sat up, wincing as the movement pulled at her wounds. She looked at her own hands, turning them over as if they belonged to a stranger. I do not feel it anymore, she whispered, a sound of profound loss. The map. It was a constant hum, a presence. Now it is just quiet. She looked at him, her gaze clear and terrifyingly direct. What did it feel like, Jace? Being inside my mind? He thought for a long moment, navigating the blinding, chaotic memory of their merged consciousness. It was not a violation, he said, the admission costing him more than he wanted to admit. It was merging. A terrifying and beautiful dissolution of the self. He took a slow, painful breath. Felt like I finally understood. They flew in silence for a time. Two enemies who had shared a soul, alone in a stolen ship. The galaxy was in turmoil. News feeds on the open channels were a chaotic scramble of reports. Entire virile fleets had gone dark. Imperial outposts were inexplicably silent. Factions on both sides, the fragmented virile houses and the coalition remnant forces, were claiming responsibility. The power vacuum was already being filled with bloodshed and confusion. They were the two most wanted individuals in the universe, the epicenter of a political earthquake, and they were utterly alone in a stolen shuttle with half a tank of fuel. There is one place, Kira said, her voice gaining a sliver of its former strength. A neutral world, Praxis. It is a legend mostly. A place where disputes are settled not by armies but by testimony. Jace grimaced. I have heard the stories. The Crucible. A place where they put your soul on trial. Most people do not walk away from it. We are out of options, she stated simply, the determination hardening in her eyes. We cannot run forever. The truth of what happened at the Synapse must be told. Otherwise, this truce we have created will just be the quiet before a much bigger storm. She was right. The act they had committed was too large to remain a secret. It would be twisted into a weapon by Lyra or by the fractured coalition. Their only chance was to define it themselves. He looked at her, at the raw resolve hardening in her vampire princess eyes. She was no longer running. She was heading into the heart of the fire, dragging him along. Set the course, Jace said, resignation heavy in his voice. Praxis. The Crucible it is. Praxis was a world of stark, brutalist beauty. Its cities were not built. They were carved from mountains of black volcanic rock, connected by soaring, crystalline bridges that sliced through the thin, cold atmosphere. There was no color here, only the sharp contrast of white light and absolute shadow. It was a world that made no compromises. The stray dog landed in the public port of the Fulcrum, the planet's capital. They were met not by soldiers or police, but by silent, robed figures known only as listeners. Their faces were smooth, featureless masks of white porcelain, devoid of any discernible emotion. There were no questions, no demands, only absolute, unnerving stillness. Kira, cloaked and hooded, stepped forward, supported by Jace. She took a deep breath, letting the thin, cold air fill her lungs. I am Princess Kira of the Viral Empire, she announced, her voice resonating with a return of her royal authority. I petition the Crucible of Testimony. I will offer my memory as evidence for a lasting truce between my people and the Terran coalition. One of the listeners inclined its head, the motion unervingly slow. The petition was accepted. The Crucible itself was a vast, open-air amphitheater carved into the very heart of the Black Mountain. Thousands of beings from 100 different neutral worlds sat in silent judgment on tiers of polished black stone. This was not a court of law. It was a place of psychic execution, where the truth, no matter how painful, was the only currency. In the center of the arena floor was a single raised platform on which rested a complex device of interlocking silver rings and glowing crystals, the mnemonic loom. This ancient device was said to weave memory into shared, tangible experience. Kira walked to the platform alone. She shed her cloak, revealing the simple tunic beneath. The fresh scars on her body, the remnants of the surgical incisions, were stark red against her pale skin, a testament to her journey and sacrifice. She looked small and terribly vulnerable under the immense gray sky. She lay down on the platform, and a listener fitted a crystalline circlet to her head, connecting her to the loom. The testimony begins, a disembodied voice echoed through the amphitheater, a voice calm and implacable. The air above the loom shimmered. Then they were all there. Inside her memory. The entire arena gasped as one. They felt the cold dread of a young virile princess being told she was to be a living sacrifice. They experienced the sharp, sterile pain as her father's surgeons cut her open, weaving the luminous golden threads of the map into her nerves. They felt the crushing loneliness of her childhood, the fear of the biolabs, and the horrifying realization of her own existence. She was a weapon. The memory shifted to her sister, Lyra. They felt Lyra's chilling ambition, the casual cruelty that was far more terrifying than any open warfare. They felt Kira's terror as she fled, the desperation of her hiding, the shock of Jace's sudden, abrasive appearance on her ship. They felt the conflict in her own heart, the need for freedom warring with the deep, ingrained programming of her people. The entire arena was silent, captive, living her fear and her resolve alongside her. They were forced to see the vampire princess not as a monster, but as the ultimate victim of her own empire. When it was over, the projection faded. Kira lay on the platform, trembling, silent tears streaming from her chrome eyes. She had laid her soul bare for the galaxy to see. A powerful murmur went through the crowd. It was a moving testimony full of pain and undeniable truth. But as the silent law of Praxis dictated, it was only one side of the story. One of the porcelain-masked listeners rose. Its voice, calm and implacable, filled the space. We have seen the pain of the key, the listener stated. Now we must see the pain of the lock. The human Jace therein will come forward and offer his testimony. Jace froze where he stood in the observation tier. This was not part of the plan. He was a witness and observer. I refuse, he said, his voice a low growl. Testimony in the Crucible is not a choice, the listener stated, its mask featureless but its authority absolute. Truth requires balance. The virile empire is on trial here, not just this woman. You are its victim. You will provide your memory. Silent, inexorable guards moved toward him. There was no fighting them. Kira looked at him from the platform, her eyes pleading, trapped. He walked the longest walk of his life down to the arena floor. He lay on a second platform brought out beside hers. The crystalline circlet was cold against his skin. He closed his eyes and the darkness behind them was immediately filled with fire and screams. The crucible was plunged into Jace's personal hell. They were on Cygnus X1 in the cockpit of his burning destroyer. They felt his disbelief turn to horror as his fleet was torn apart by the Viral's living ships. Then they were in the prison camp. The arena gasped as one as they experienced the bioagent. They felt the phantom spiders crawling under their skin. They saw the faces of their loved ones melt into screaming monstrosities. They felt Jace's mind being peeled back, layer by layer, the relentless clinical torture designed by the very species whose princess lay beside him. They felt the death of Sergeant Rasta, the weight of his failure, the crushing, soul-deep agony of survival. It was a memory of pure, undiluted suffering, a testament to the brutal cost of the virile war machine. By the time the memory faded, a current of raw, unbridled hatred for the virile people was palpable in the air. He had given them the balance they wanted, and it was a verdict of guilt signed in blood. But Jace was not finished. He focused his will, wresting control of the mnemonic loom. You have seen what was done to me, his voice boomed through the arena, amplified by the device. You have seen the monster they are. A new image formed, softer this time. It was the cave on the jungle planet. They saw Kira, her face illuminated by the hallucinogenic rain, her eyes full of a fear that mirrored his own. They saw her confess the secret of her scars. They felt the raw, electric tension of the moment before the kiss. And they felt her pull away, felt her whisper, "You wouldn't survive me." The projection shifted again. They were in the echo chamber. They felt his shock at her apparent betrayal, and then the stunning reversal. They felt the searing venomous fire of her kiss, and they heard her desperate, whispered plea for him to survive. The final memory he projected was of him standing over her in the synapse chamber, the broken hilt of his knife, the broken wings, in his hand. The entire arena felt his conflict. The pull of a decade of vengeance warring with the fierce, undeniable need to save this one woman. The projection died. Jace sat up, his body drenched in sweat, his heart pounding. Her people did this to me, he said, his voice cracking with emotion, yet ringing with absolute conviction. They took everything from me but this woman. She is not her people. She is the one who paid the price for their peace. She has the right to live. She has the right to be free of the war that made us both. A profound, echoing silence stretched for an entire minute. Then the lead listener stood. The testimony is complete. The balance has been weighed. A verdict is reached. The absolute silence in the crucible stretched, thick and heavy, like the void between stars. Jace and Kira lay side by side on the platforms, exhausted, exposed, their souls laid bare before the thousands of observers. The lead listener, its porcelain mask reflecting the harsh light of the loom, finally spoke, its voice carrying the weight of ancient judgment. The crucible has witnessed the truth of the high blood and the truth of the human. Princess Kira of the Virile Empire sought to avert a cyclical war by utilizing her own body as a weapon of deactivation. She paid the ultimate price by sacrificing her identity as the key, enduring mortal risk and betrayal. The human, Jace Therin, sought vengeance for the death of his people, yet he chose to abandon that vengeance to preserve the future of the peace the princess offered. The verdict was announced with chilling finality. The testimony proves that the synapse was not destroyed by an act of war, but by an act of desperate, singular sacrifice for peace. No government shall retaliate for this action. Furthermore, a permanent, binding truce is established between the remnants of the Virile factions and the Terran coalition. The Virile Princess Kira and the human Jace Therin are granted absolute amnesty from all retribution, official or otherwise. Their combined sacrifice is the new foundation. The statement was profound. It was a complete overhaul of galactic law, enforced by the ancient, inviolable authority of Praxis. The war was officially over, ended not by treaties or surrender, but by a forced, undeniable truth. The verdict was met with stunned silence, quickly giving way to a chaotic, explosive eruption of noise. The observers, now free to speak, argued, shouted, and surged forward. But the listeners, silent and strong, maintained order. Jace and Kira were escorted out of the crucible and taken to a neutral medical bay. They were treated for their wounds, their silence profound. Kira's physical injuries, the surgical scars, were healing rapidly, but the emotional exhaustion was visible in the shadows under her eyes. Later, sitting on the edge of a clean, sterile bed, Kira spoke, her voice still hoarse. I have no people, Jace, she said, staring at her hands. The map is gone. My purpose as a key is over. The factions are in chaos. They need a leader, someone to unite them against the inevitable infighting. She looked at him, her gaze weighted with responsibility. I owe them that. I am their symbol, the one who paid the price for their peace. I must go back. Go back where? Jace countered, leaning against the wall, his arms crossed over his bandaged chest. To a bunch of backstabbing lords who will try to dissect you to get a new map? Lyra is still out there, princess. Lyra is just one snake in a massive nest, Kira said, a flicker of the old fire returning. My people need an anchor. They need to see that the cost of peace was borne by their royalty. I have to stabilize them. I cannot run from this new duty. The words were painful but honest. She was choosing duty over freedom, choosing to be an anchor for her broken civilization. Jace didn't argue further. He understood duty. It had killed the soldier in him, but it was now calling to the vampire princess. He walked back to the stray dog. The ship was still battered, still smelling of oil and ozone, but the Praxis maintenance crews had refueled it and made basic repairs. He sat in the pilot's chair, the worn synth leather a familiar comfort. He was free. Absolutely undeniably free. He waited for hours not knowing if she would come. Just before dawn, a figure appeared on the landing pad. It was Kira, dressed not in a tunic but in the dark, streamlined flight gear of the Virile Royal Guard, a uniform she had shed in the jungle, now reclaimed. In her hand she held the sleek, black, insectoid helmet of the guard. She walked toward the stray dog, her movements fluid, powerful, and decisive. She reached the boarding ramp and paused. I'm going to Virilla Prime, Jace, she announced. To the home world. The seat of the throne. She looked down at the helmet in her hands, the symbol of the rigid, cruel order she was fighting. With a decisive movement, she casually tossed the helmet aside. It clattered against the metal deck and rolled into a shadow. My people will find their way, she said, meeting his gaze. They do not need a princess to rule them. They need an example of what it means to be free, even from the ghosts of their past. I will not wear the mask of the warrior, but I will show them the way forward. She took one final, crucial step. She set her course of duty, but she chose her path of freedom. She did not enter the ship. She simply stood at the foot of the ramp, her silver hair catching the first sliver of the cold Praxis dawn. The war is over, Jace, she said, her voice soft but strong. My purpose as a weapon is over. My duty as an heir is established. But my life, that has just begun. She smiled, a small, genuine smile that transformed her face, making her look less like a terrifying vampire princess and more like the brave, desperate girl from the jungle cave. I have rewritten my purpose. I am no longer the key. I am the survivor. She reached out her hand to him. Let's fly, Commander. He reached out his hand and she took it. Her grip was firm, warm, and electric. They were no longer a commander and a princess, no longer an asset and a liability, no longer a weapon and a victim. They were just two survivors heading for the stars, finally writing a map of their own together. He didn't pull her into the cockpit. He simply let her hand rest in his, a silent promise of everything they had been and everything they were yet to be. He reached forward and engaged the ignition sequence. The stray dog, battered and bruised but full of purpose, roared to life, lifting off the black rock of Praxis and ascending into the boundless, uncertain freedom of the stars. The stray dog did not look like the harbinger of galactic peace, yet that is precisely what it was. It punched through the jump gate and accelerated into a silent corner of space, far from the monitoring clusters of Praxis. Jace, leaning back in the pilot's seat, watched Kira in the co-pilot seat. She was no longer wearing the heavy Royal Guard uniform. She was dressed in simple, functional human clothes he had scavenged. The pale moonlight sheen of her skin and the chrome hue of her eyes were the only reminders of her terrifying origin. The tension between them was gone, replaced by an uneasy, yet undeniable, synchronization. Their bond, forged in the violent psychic dissolution of the synapse, remained. It was no longer a forced merger of minds, but a subtle, constant awareness, a faint echo of her mood in the back of his mind, a fleeting sense of his protective instinct in hers. Where are we heading? Kira asked, her voice calm. Somewhere quiet, Jace replied, adjusting the ship's erratic energy regulator, the same one she had stolen on Port Noctis. Somewhere the new Foundation hasn't reached yet. The farthest edge of the Perseus arm. They call it the Silent Rim. Kira nodded, her eyes fixed on the star chart. The virile houses will collapse into anarchy without the synapse. The coalition will try to fill the vacuum with their own laws. The peace is fragile, Jace. It's a wound, not a healing. Then we let them bleed for a while, Jace stated, his voice flat. Our part is done. We gave them the truth. What they do with it is their problem. He turned to her, his expression serious. And Lyra? She's still a threat. Kira smiled, a predatory flash of teeth. Lyra has no resources now. Her enhanced guard is useless. She is running, Jace. For the first time she is the one running. On the second day of their journey, Kira found him in the cargo hold, staring at the remnants of his past. The shattered hilt of his knife, the broken wings, lay on a workbench, its crystalline blade reduced to glittering dust. You should discard it, she said softly, approaching him. It represents pain and death. Jace shook his head. It represents survival, princess. It was the only thing I had left of my life. He picked up the empty hilt. But the old meaning is gone. The vengeance is gone. It shattered when I threw it trying to save you. Kira took the hilt from his hand. She walked over to a stack of salvaged virile biotech. She picked up a small, smooth piece of crystallized biohull, a piece of the organic armor of her own people. Using a small precision cutter, she began to carve. Her hands, nimble and precise, worked the alien material with an innate understanding. After hours of meticulous work, she handed the hilt back to him. The empty guard was now filled with a single elegant blade, sharp and luminous. It was not glass, nor was it coalition steel. It was virile biocrystal, the color of moonlight, forged from the shattered remnants of her own empire. It is still the broken wings, she whispered, her eyes meeting his. But now it is a tool of creation, not destruction. It is forged from the enemy, but it serves you. It is a new foundation. Jace stared at the beautiful, deadly weapon in his hand. He had gone from the broken soldier seeking vengeance to the holder of a new future, forged by the last of the vampire royalty. Their relationship deepened in the long, quiet void of space. The residual Vitananites in Kira's system, the remnants of the key that had fused with Jace's mind during the kiss, created a unique physiological bond. Kira often found herself drawn to Jace's side when he slept, standing guard, her virile instincts of protection overwhelming the social conditioning of a princess. She found his human fragility endearing and frustrating in equal measure. One evening, Jace woke to find her watching him. The bond, she said, her voice low. It allows me to anticipate your needs, your pain. It is protective. Jace reached out and touched her hand. Is it painful? No, she replied. But it is synchronicity. It is the universe correcting an imbalance. She then explained the truth of the poison kiss. The neurotoxin was real, Jace. It was designed to paralyze a human. But the high blood in my saliva, the nanobiotics, it also contained a powerful hyperregenerative counteragent. My body was simultaneously killing and reviving you. It was a risk I had to take. The kiss had been the ultimate declaration. To enter her was to risk death, but to enter her was also to accept life. Jace pulled her close, the movement still painful but necessary. I guess we are stuck with each other then, princess. Kira rested her head against his shoulder, finding an unexpected comfort in the human warmth. We are two broken pieces, Commander. And together we are the only map that matters. They eventually reached the Silent Rim, an isolated, lawless sector of space filled with independent colonies and ancient, forgotten trade routes. Here, the news of the Synapse's destruction was just a rumor, a distant legend. They did not settle down. Instead, they used the stray dog to carve out a new purpose. Kira, using her intimate psychic knowledge of the now dormant virile networks, and Jace, using his decades of scavenging and survival skills, began to help the small, independent colonies left vulnerable by the collapse of both empires. They became the cartographers of freedom. They used their unique knowledge to disable automated virile defense systems that still posed a threat, and they guided coalition refugees through the dangerous, newly formed pirate territories. They were neither human nor virile now. They were an entity forged in the fire of mutual trauma, working to create the peace they had earned. The old commander, Jace Therin, had finally found a cause worth fighting for, and the vampire princess, Kira, had finally found a home that was not defined by a throne. Their journey was long, dangerous, and uncertain, but every flight path they set, every obstacle they overcame, was a testament to the single impossible choice made in the Synapse Chamber. The choice of life over vengeance, of entry over ending. They flew, two survivors, towards an unknown horizon, writing the new history of the galaxy one jump at a time.